Imagine you are the most powerful king in the world. You have conquered every enemy around you. Your armies are feared from the mountains of Anatolia to the plains of Mesopotamia. You have everything, and then one night, you have a dream. In the dream, you see a vine growing out of your daughter's body. It grows and grows, spreading its branches across every land you have ever conquered, covering the entire known world in shadow. You wake up in a cold sweat. You call your wisest priests. You ask them what it means. They tell you the truth, because they are brave enough, or perhaps foolish enough, to do so. The vine, they say, means that your daughter's son will one day rule the world in your place. Your own grandson will take everything from you. What would you do? If you are Astyages, king of the Medes, the answer is simple. You find a solution before the problem even exists. Welcome to the story of Cyrus the Great, and it begins not with a king, but with a baby that a king desperately wanted dead. Around 600 years before the birth of Christ, the ancient Near East was divided between a handful of great powers. Egypt controlled the Nile. Babylon controlled the rivers of Mesopotamia, and in the highlands of what is now northwestern Iran, a people called the Medes had built an empire that stretched from the borders of Lydia in the west to the edges of the Iranian plateau in the east. The Medes were not a gentle people. They had risen to power by helping destroy the Assyrian Empire, one of the most brutal military machines the ancient world had ever seen. They had watched Nineveh, the great Assyrian capital, burn to the ground. They had divided the spoils, and now their king Astyages sat on a throne built on the bones of his enemies and believed, as powerful men often do, that his dynasty would last forever. He had one daughter. Her name was Mandane, and when the dream came, Astyages made a decision that would change the course of human history. He would not let Mandane marry a Median nobleman, because a Median nobleman's son might be powerful enough to actually fulfill the prophecy. Instead, he married her off to a Persian, a man named Cambyses, from a minor vassal kingdom to the south, called Anshan. Nobody. A man whose son, Astyages calculated, would never have the power to threaten him. The calculation was wrong. When Mandane became pregnant, Astyages had another dream. This time he saw a great flood pouring out of his daughter, covering all of Asia. The priests interpreted it the same way. The child in her womb was the threat. The child had to die. Astyages summoned one of his most trusted nobles, a man named Harpagus. He gave him a direct order: take the child. When it is born, take it out into the wilderness. Leave it there to die. Harpagus was loyal, but he was also careful. He did not want to be the man who personally killed the king's grandson, because kings change their minds, and he did not want blood on his hands that could one day be used against him. So, he passed the order down. He gave the infant to a herdsman named Mithridates, who lived with his wife in the mountains outside the city, and he told the herdsman to expose the child on the hillside and let the elements do the work. The herdsman took the baby home, and here is where the story takes a turn that feels almost too perfect to be true, which is perhaps why Herodotus, writing over a century later, chose to record it exactly this way. The herdsman's wife had just given birth to a stillborn child. She begged her husband not to abandon the infant. She had seen the fine clothes the baby was wrapped in, the golden ornaments around its neck. She knew this was no ordinary child. Her husband agreed. They buried their own dead child in the royal infant's place, dressed in the royal clothes, and they raised a living boy as their own son. They named him Cyrus. For 10 years, Cyrus grew up as a shepherd's son in the mountains of Media. He did not know who he was. He did not know that a king had ordered his death. He did not know that somewhere in the royal palace, his grandfather sat on a throne built partly on the lie that he was already gone. But Cyrus was not easy to hide. Even as a child, there was something about him that other children recognized. He was the kind of boy who naturally became the leader of every game, every fight, every adventure, and one day, playing a game with the other village children, he did something that brought his secret crashing down. The children were playing at being a royal court. They had chosen Cyrus as their king, because of course they had. And one of the boys in the game, the son of a Median nobleman, refused to obey. Cyrus had him seized and beaten. The nobleman's son went home and told his father. The father was furious. He went to Astyages and complained. Astyages summoned the herdsman's son to his court to be punished, and when Astyages looked at the boy standing before him, he felt something shift in his chest. The boy had his daughter's eyes. He had the bearing of someone who had never been taught to be afraid of kings. Astyages asked the herdsman to explain. The herdsman, faced with the king himself, told the Astyages called Harpagus. He asked him what had happened to the child he had been ordered to kill. Harpagus, realizing the game was up, also told the truth. What Astyages did next tells you everything you need to know about the kind of man he was. He told Harpagus that he forgave him. He said the gods had clearly protected the boy, and that he was glad his grandson was alive. He invited Harpagus to a feast to celebrate. Harpagus came to the feast. He ate the food that was placed before him. He ate well, and when the meal was over, a servant brought out a covered dish and placed it in front of him. Harpagus lifted the lid. Inside were the head, the hands, and the feet of his own son. Astyages watched him. He asked Harpagus if he knew what meat he had eaten. Harpagus, with a composure that must have cost him everything he had, said that he did. He said that whatever the king did was right. He went home. He said nothing. He waited. As for Cyrus, Astyages consulted his priests again. They told him that the prophecy had already been fulfilled. The boy had already been king. In that children's game in the village, the dream had come true in miniature. There was nothing more to fear. Astyages sent Cyrus south to live with his biological parents in Persia, in the minor kingdom of Anshan, and he put the whole matter out of his mind. He should not have done that. Cyrus grew up in Persia, knowing exactly who he was. He knew he was the grandson of the most powerful king in the region. He knew his people, the Persians, were vassals of the Medes, required to pay tribute, required to bow. He knew that his grandfather had tried to have him killed before he was old enough to walk. The Persians were not a small people. They were tough, mountain-hardened, experienced fighters, but they had never had a leader who could unite them, who could make them believe that they were more than a subject people on the edge of someone else's empire. Cyrus became that leader. Around 553 BC, he raised the Persian tribes in revolt against Median rule. The first battles did not go well. The Median army was larger, better equipped, and more experienced. Cyrus was pushed back. There were moments when the whole rebellion looked like it would collapse before it had properly begun. And then Harpagus made his move. The man who had watched his son's remains served to him on a platter had spent years waiting for exactly this moment. He had been building relationships, quietly, carefully, with other Median nobles who resented Astyages. When the Persian revolt began, Harpagus sent a secret message to Cyrus. He told him that when the armies met again, the Median commanders would switch sides. He kept his word. In the decisive battle, the Median army turned on its own king. Astyages was captured, not by the enemy, but by his own generals. Cyrus rode into Ecbatana, the Median capital, in 550 BC. He found his grandfather in chains. He did not execute him. He did not humiliate him. He kept him at court, treated him with a kind of distant respect, and let him live out his days as a reminder of what happens when a king tries to murder his own future. This is the moment where most conquerors would stop. They would sit down on the throne they had just won, declare victory, and spend the rest of their lives enjoying it. Cyrus did not stop. He looked west toward the kingdom of Lydia, ruled by a man named Croesus, who was so wealthy that his name became a byword for riches that has lasted to this day. He looked south toward Babylon, the greatest city in the world, a city of hanging gardens and towering ziggurats and walls, so thick that armies had broken against them for centuries. He looked at the world, and he saw not what it was, but what it could be. The Median Empire had been the foundation. But Cyrus was not building a Median empire. He was building something that had never existed before, something so large, so organized, so deliberately constructed that historians would spend the next 2,500 years arguing about how one man managed to pull it off. He was building the Persian Empire, and he was just getting started. Next time Croesus of Lydia has heard about this new Persian king, he consults the oracle at Delphi, receives a prophecy that he completely misunderstands, and marches his army east to stop Cyrus before he becomes unstoppable. He brings with him the finest cavalry in the ancient world. Cyrus brings camels, and the horses, it turns out, have a problem with camels.